There is a hidden current flowing through your consciousness, a river of gold and silver that no eye has seen and no hand has touched. Yet, it responds to your voice, your thought, your faith. If you will speak for 60 seconds each morning, 6 simple phrases, you shall unlock this treasure, and wealth will rise to meet you as naturally as the sun greets the day. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. These words, spoken through the prophet, have echoed through the ages, yet few understand the depth of their meaning. They are not merely about possession of earthly wealth or the treasures that line the coffers of men. They speak to a truth far more intimate, far more immediate than any man can grasp from observation alone. The Lord here speaks of a treasury that is not outside of you, not in distant vaults or guarded chests, but within your own consciousness. It is a treasury that responds to the tone of your mind, to the cadence of your thought, and to the conviction of your heart. Many look upon the world and see scarcity, limitation, and the cruel hand of fate, yet this scripture whispers a secret that is eternally true. All abundance has already been provided, and it is waiting for your recognition. Consider for a moment how often you have believed that wealth must come from effort alone, from the labor of your hands or the transactions of the marketplace. You have been taught to look outward, to seek beyond yourself for the provision that you desire. But observe the pattern of life. Every man, whether he prospers or struggles, first experiences the inner reality of what he receives. There is a cause, invisible and unseen, that precedes the effect. The silver and the gold belong to your inner consciousness before they appear as coins or notes in your hand. The universe itself is but a mirror of the state you assume. The outer world reflects the inner conviction. When you grasp this, you understand that the treasures of the world are not locked in banks nor confined to the possessions of others. They lie in the awareness that acknowledges them as yours. Let me give you an example that may appear ordinary, yet it illustrates this law perfectly. There was a man who had long struggled to maintain his livelihood. He labored tirelessly in his trade, yet his earnings were meager, and he felt that life withheld its bounty. One night he read the words, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts." Something within him stirred. He began to speak quietly each morning, affirming to himself the ownership of all wealth, not as a wish, but as a certainty. Each day he would imagine himself walking into his shop, seeing the goods he desired, and receiving payment without worry or struggle. Months later, he discovered an inheritance he had long forgotten, a bond issued by a distant relative that had matured tenfold. He had done nothing outwardly to claim it. The universe had responded to the state he had assumed within. The outer effect, the silver and the gold, had waited only for his inner acknowledgement. This principle is not confined to extraordinary events or chance occurrences. It functions in the simplest of circumstances. Consider the mother who desires to provide for her children. She may not see the means at first, yet in her imagination, she holds the image of abundance, a full pantry, clothing for her little ones, coins to meet her bills. Each morning, each evening, she repeats this vision inwardly, feeling it as already fulfilled. The unseen life within her mind gathers the resources, the opportunities, the assistance she needs, until her outer circumstances bend to the reality she has assumed. This is the law at work. The silver and the gold respond to the consciousness that claims them, not to the labor, the pleading, or the begging outside of oneself. When you speak the words of Scripture and reflect upon their inner meaning, understand that the Lord of hosts is none other than the consciousness in which all things exist. He is the intelligence within you that holds every possibility, the creative power that shapes worlds, the eternal source of all abundance. Mine does not refer to the possession of another, nor to a distant deity acting independently of your awareness. It refers to the principle that owns all things in the unseen, the infinite reservoir to which your mind has access at every moment. To awaken this power is to step into a relationship with reality that is intimate, direct, and immediate. Wealth is not a stranger, it is a close companion, awaiting only your recognition to manifest fully. You may ask, then why so many remain in want? The answer lies in belief and attention. If you attend to lack, you nourish absence, and the outer world must conform. If your consciousness dwells upon limitation, if your imagination paints a scene of empty hands and closed doors, the silver and the gold remain unseen, unclaimed. But if you turn your attention inward, if you speak with conviction, if you imagine as real the possession of your desire, the outer world cannot resist. It must yield, for it is shaped by the invisible law of consciousness. There is a story told of a merchant who prayed for prosperity, but received little. Each night he would imagine his store overflowing with goods, his customers plentiful and eager, his shelves laden with the finest wares. He walked each morning into his shop as though it were already filled. The first week, the store seemed unchanged, yet he persisted. The second week, a loyal customer returned, bringing friends with her, and the coffers began to swell. By the third month, he had more than he had ever dared to dream. The silver and the gold, though invisible at first, had responded faithfully to the inner recognition he had maintained. This is not magic, it is law, the law of consciousness that Scripture has always revealed. Observe how this applies not only to wealth in the literal sense, but to every desire you may hold. The law is universal. Health, love, opportunity, and happiness all reside in the same treasury, accessible by the same principle. If you accept that the silver and the gold are yours, you accept abundance itself as a fact. If you realize that this wealth is held within consciousness, you understand that your outer experience will necessarily reflect it. The words of Scripture are not distant promises, they are immediate truths. Each syllable, each phrase resonates within the mind and awakens the unseen forces that respond to conviction. The practice is simple, yet requires unwavering faith. Each morning, before the mind is drawn outward by the cares of the world, repeat the words, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts." Do not murmur them as a prayer for tomorrow. Speak them with feeling, as the voice of reality itself. Close your eyes and see the coins and notes, the treasures in your hand, the opportunities flowing freely toward you. The universe, impartial and exact, will begin to mirror this inner reality. The doors that seemed closed will open. The chances that seemed rare will become frequent. The gold and the silver are not rewards for effort. They are responses to assumption, to the acknowledgement of ownership within. I have known men and women who lived in small dwellings, struggling month by month, who were transformed by this practice alone. One woman, a seamstress, could not meet her bills and feared for her home. She began each morning by speaking aloud, with absolute conviction, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine." She imagined herself paying her debts, buying provisions, dressing her children in comfort. Within weeks, opportunities came that she could not have anticipated, work she had never sought, gifts from friends, forgotten sums returned. She did nothing outwardly unusual, but her inner recognition had summoned what was hers in the unseen. Notice, too, the role of imagination. Imagination is the workshop where the treasures are forged. Words alone, repeated without feeling, are powerless. You must accompany the phrases with a living sense of possession. See, hear, and feel the silver and gold as if they exist now. Hear the rustle of coins, feel the texture of paper money, sense the satisfaction in having enough and more than enough. This is the state that precedes the fact. The universe knows no distinction between imagined and actual reality when imagination is accompanied by feeling. It responds to the state you occupy, not the outward appearance. It is essential, therefore, to guard your attention. The moment you allow doubts, fears, or the sight of lack to intrude, you weaken the power of your recognition. Each thought of scarcity is a step away from the treasure. But the minute you affirm, with voice and feeling, the ownership of the silver and the gold, the currents of the unseen world bend to you. You do not labor against life, you work in harmony with it. You do not struggle for provision, you assume the state of having, and the world manifests accordingly. Even in times of apparent misfortune, the law remains steadfast. A man may see debts multiply, an account may appear empty, and yet, if he maintains the inner conviction of abundance, the outer world will ultimately conform. The unseen is eternal. It is not shaken by passing events. You may imagine a river of gold flowing toward you, even while your hands appear empty. The moment you hold that image with faith, the river begins to take form. The silver and the gold have always been yours. They wait only for recognition, for the assumption that they are in your possession. Think, if you will, of a farmer who sows seeds. He does not demand the harvest before planting, yet he expects the growth to follow. The seeds invisible beneath the soil are already a harvest in waiting. So it is with consciousness. When you plant the words of Scripture, when you imagine the wealth and feel it inwardly, the harvest of silver and gold will inevitably appear. You cannot plant without reaping. The unseen law operates without error, without hesitation, without favoritism. It answers to the inner state and nothing else. Consider also how this principle liberates you from anxiety and struggle. When you know that all wealth belongs to the consciousness, you no longer fret over bills, misfortune, or scarcity. Your mind rests in assurance, and your heart becomes a channel for abundance rather than a vessel of worry. Life, which once seemed cruel and unpredictable, becomes a mirror of your inner recognition. The silver is yours, the gold is yours, because you acknowledge them within. You do not beg, you do not plead, you claim and accept. This is the true freedom that Scripture reveals. There are countless stories in every life where unseen help appears to those who recognize it inwardly. A young man, unemployed and despairing, spent each morning speaking, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine." He imagined himself receiving payment for services rendered, opportunities appearing where none seemed possible, money flowing in ways he had not foreseen. Within a short time, a series of fortunate events led him to a position of abundance far beyond his expectation. Not because he worked harder, but because he had entered into the consciousness where wealth was already his. This is the meaning of the Scripture. It is not a promise to be fulfilled later. It is a reality to be recognized now. The law works the same for the simplest desires as for the grandest. A coin found on the street, a gift received from a friend, a forgotten sum returned, all are manifestations of the inner recognition of ownership. You may begin with small things, with simple acknowledgement of the silver and gold around you, and as your consciousness grows, the outer world expands to meet it. The universe is infinitely responsive. It does not withhold its riches from any who assume the state of possession. And so let your practice be continuous, not mechanical. Speak the words, feel them, imagine them. Let the silver and the gold exist in your awareness first, and the outer world will follow. Watch for opportunities, be open to the unseen, yet never be swayed by appearances. If the evidence of the senses contradicts your inner state, hold fast to the inner truth. The world obeys the assumption, not the circumstance. Those who have mastered this principle have discovered that they can call forth wealth, not by striving, but by assuming its presence and living from that state each day. In all this, remember that the silver and the gold are symbols of abundance itself, not merely coins and notes. They represent the provision of life, the fulfillment of desire, and the flowing of all that is good into your experience. When you recognize this, when you speak the Scripture with understanding and feeling, you align with the eternal law. The unseen world, infinite and impartial, responds faithfully, manifesting your inner recognition into the forms you see and touch. It is a law as certain as the rising sun and as inexhaustible as the treasure it governs. Thus, let the words echo in your mind, let the feeling accompany each repetition, and let imagination dwell in the scene of wealth. The silver is yours, the gold is yours, because you recognize them within. They are not distant, they are not delayed, they exist now in the consciousness that knows itself as the owner of all things. With this recognition, your path to abundance is assured, for the law of consciousness responds only to the state you maintain, and nothing else in the world can prevent it from answering. Now let us turn to the inner law, that divine principle which governs all manifestation, unseen yet precise, silent yet inexorably powerful. It is not a law of men, nor of institutions, nor of commerce. It is a law of consciousness itself, and it is the mechanism through which the silver and the gold, the abundance you seek, respond to your recognition. You may labor tirelessly in the outer world, yet unless your inner state corresponds to the reality you desire, the outer appearance will remain unyielding. Every effect has its cause, and the cause is always found in the unseen realms of your mind. The law of assumption teaches this truth. Assume the state of having, dwell within it, and the world, obedient to the unseen, will manifest it. Consider a man who has long desired to prosper in business. He attends every meeting, makes every effort, and yet fortune seems distant. He grows anxious, doubtful, and weary. Then he discovers the principle. It is not the act, the plan, the struggle that brings wealth. It is the inner assumption of its possession. If he can enter into the state of having, if he can truly live, feel, and breathe as one who already possesses the riches he seeks, the outer world cannot resist. Opportunities will appear, patrons will arise, coincidences will align, and the wealth that seemed distant will flow freely to him. The outer law is merely a mirror of the inner law. It reflects with absolute fidelity the state assumed within. Many read the scriptures and hear the words, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts," yet they fail to see the implication. The Lord speaks not of distant banks, nor of treasures hidden in the earth, but of the consciousness in which all things exist. The silver and the gold exist in the unseen first, and the outer world is compelled to obey the reality you acknowledge. It is not effort that creates it, but assumption. You are the cause of your world. Every thought, every inner feeling, every conviction shapes the environment around you. When you assume wealth, when you enter into the consciousness of abundance, the world bends to that assumption, manifesting it in ways you may not have foreseen, yet in exact proportion to the state you maintain. Observe the role of imagination in this law. Imagination is the instrument of creation, the workshop where all desires are first shaped. When you imagine, feel, and assume the state of possession, you are working with the raw materials of reality itself. Picture a man longing for prosperity. He imagines himself walking into a room filled with coins and notes, receiving payment with ease, feeling the satisfaction of abundance in his heart. If he repeats this each day, allowing the image to live vividly within him, the unseen realm begins to respond. Opportunities arise, debts are repaid, unexpected sources of income appear. This is not fanciful thinking, it is the operation of the inner law, precise and unerring. The outer effect is inevitable when the inner cause is established. Let us reflect on a practical example. A young woman struggling with limited means discovers that she may not change her outer circumstances through effort alone. She begins each morning by assuming the state she desires, a life of abundance, free from worry, filled with provision. She speaks quietly to herself, imagining the flow of resources, seeing herself in possession of what she needs, feeling the joy and relief as though it has already arrived. Within weeks, she finds opportunities she had not sought, unexpected gifts, work that appears just at the right moment, forgotten money returned. The silver and the gold respond to her inner recognition, not her labor, and she experiences firsthand the power of assumption. Notice also the precision of this law. The unseen realm does not respond to vague desires or half-hearted wishes. It requires clear assumption, vivid imagining, and sustained feeling. To say, "I hope to have wealth someday," is ineffective, for hope acknowledges absence. To assume the state, to enter into the consciousness of having, is to awaken the response of the unseen. Once you do this, every outward circumstance becomes aligned with your inner reality. Even obstacles, seeming misfortune, or apparent lack cannot counteract a mind firmly fixed in assumption. The law is impartial and exact. It cannot fail. It responds not to wish, not to desire, not to struggle, but to the inner state you inhabit. Consider a story of a man in trade who, despite repeated losses, chose to dwell in the state of wealth. Each morning, before stepping into his shop, he would close his eyes and see his shelves filled, his accounts abundant, his customers satisfied. He spoke quietly to himself, affirming the reality of his possession. Days passed with no outward sign, yet he persisted. One evening, a long-forgotten contract was honored unexpectedly, and soon thereafter, additional business flowed to him, more than he had ever imagined. He did not labor beyond his usual effort. He did not plead or demand. He assumed, and the universe obeyed. This is the inner law made visible. The inner law also explains why men and women, equally laboring, find vastly different results. Two merchants may toil for years, yet one prospers while the other remains in scarcity. The difference lies in the state assumed within. The prosperous one dwells in the consciousness of possession, sees the outcome realized, and lives accordingly. The one in want focuses on lack, fears limitation, and imagines scarcity. The outer world is simply a reflection of their inner assumption. It is not chance, it is not luck, it is law. Consciousness shapes reality. The silver and the gold await the one who assumes them as theirs. It is important to understand that the act of assumption is not mere wishful thinking. It is a deliberate, sustained occupation of the mind with the reality you desire. One must not fluctuate between desire and doubt. One must not entertain the sight of lack while seeking abundance. The two cannot coexist. If you wish to manifest wealth, you must live daily, hourly, moment by moment in the state of possession. Speak, feel, and imagine as though it exists now. The unseen, infinite, and eternal responds with absolute fidelity to the inner reality. Imagination may also be used to navigate circumstances that appear difficult or impossible. Consider the man who faces debt, bills, and scarcity. He closes his eyes and sees himself not in lack but in abundance, paying his obligations with ease, receiving what is due, and finding opportunity in every corner. He speaks quietly, affirming the reality of wealth and sufficiency. Though outwardly he may still see obstacles, he does not acknowledge them as final. The unseen, responsive to his inner recognition, moves to align events with his state. What seemed impossible becomes natural. The silver and the gold, which always belonged to his consciousness, now manifest in the outer world. Many fail to recognize the subtleties of this principle. They imagine fleetingly, speak affirmations half-heartedly, and then return to the evidence of the senses. The law does not act on half measures. It requires total occupation with the state of desire fulfilled. To occupy the consciousness of wealth is not a momentary fancy. It is a living, breathing reality. One must feel the joy, the security, and the freedom that come from possession. The words alone are ineffective without feeling. The inner law, precise and unerring, responds to the state, not to mere utterance. Stories abound of those who have mastered this subtle art. A woman, long in financial difficulty, each morning imagined her household secure, her needs met, her provision abundant. She entered into the state with feeling, seeing and hearing her resources as present. Within weeks, she received an inheritance she had almost forgotten. Payments arrived early, and opportunities appeared where she least expected. The unseen realm, guided by her assumption, conformed to the state she occupied. Her outer world mirrored the inner, revealing the eternal accuracy of the law. The law also liberates from worry. When you recognize that all wealth exists in consciousness and responds to assumption, you no longer fear the absence of money, the failure of ventures, or the denial of opportunity. You understand that the outer world is not your master, your inner state is. You assume, and the outer world bends to this reality. You do not need to manipulate circumstances or plead for provision. You need only assume possession, dwell in the reality, and maintain the feeling of fulfillment. This is the inner law at work, exact, precise, and unerring. Imagination, faith, and assumption working together form the triad of power through which the silver and the gold respond. Imagination forms the scene, feeling gives it life, and assumption sustains it as reality. You are the conscious creator, and the unseen is your obedient servant. No outer circumstance can prevent the fulfillment of that which you assume. The law is impartial and omnipotent. It does not favor one over another. It responds only to the state you occupy. Wealth is a matter of consciousness, not circumstance. The inner law explains why meditation, reflection, and deliberate assumption are so potent. When you quiet the mind and occupy it with the reality of wealth, when you speak the phrases with conviction, when you see and feel the treasure as already yours, you align with the creative principle itself. The unseen cannot resist a mind fully occupied with the possession of desire. All forces, all events, all circumstances bend to the state you assume. The silver and the gold, which exist eternally in consciousness, are released and brought into form. Even ordinary circumstances respond. A coin found, a debt returned, an unexpected opportunity. These are all reflections of the inner law in action. By assuming wealth inwardly, you transform the outer world without effort, without struggle, without waiting. The law does not work according to human timing, but according to the establishment of inner state. When you occupy the consciousness of having, when you live and feel as though your desire is already fulfilled, the outer world bends naturally, inevitably, and without resistance. Close your eyes for a moment and consider the power that lies within imagination. It is not a trivial faculty reserved for children or dreamers, nor is it idle fantasy. Imagination is the workshop of reality, the divine laboratory, where all things are first shaped before they appear in the world of sense. When you wish to manifest wealth, to draw the silver and the gold into your life, you must enter this workshop with clarity, precision, and feeling. For in imagination, the unseen is given form, the invisible is made tangible, and what you accept as real there must, by immutable law, manifest outside. Many overlook this truth. They believe that effort, labor, and struggle will produce wealth, yet the outer world is but a reflection of the inner state. Consider a painter who desires a masterpiece. He does not begin with a canvas full of colors haphazardly arranged. First, he envisions the composition in his mind, sees the interplay of light and shadow, imagines the brushstrokes as they will fall, and feels the satisfaction of the finished piece. Only then does he lift brush to canvas, and the vision is translated into form. So it is with your life. Your imagination must hold the scene of wealth, vivid and complete, before the outer world can mirror it. Picture a room bathed in morning light. In this room lies the evidence of your desire, coins and notes neatly arranged, opportunities within reach, doors opening with ease. Feel the texture of the money beneath your fingers, hear the soft rustle of bills, smell the leather of the wallet. A voice, calm and certain, says to you, "It is all yours." This is not a fleeting image, it is a living reality within your mind. Each day as you occupy this scene, you breathe life into the unseen, and the universe, obedient to the inner law, begins to bring it into the outer world. Let me give you an example of how this functions in everyday life. A young merchant, struggling to establish his business, began each morning by imagining his shop filled with patrons, goods abundant, and his coffers overflowing. He saw the coins passing from hand to hand, felt the satisfaction of his customers, heard the warmth of greetings and gratitude. At first, the outer world seemed unchanged, His shop remained modest, and patrons were few, yet he persisted. Weeks later, an unexpected order arrived, bringing in more revenue than he had imagined possible. Soon thereafter, other opportunities appeared, and his business flourished beyond expectation. The unseen realm had responded to the inner scene he had held with faith and feeling. Notice the role of feeling in imagination. Without feeling, imagination is mere mental exercise, a picture without life. To manifest wealth, you must enter the scene as though it is real now and live in the satisfaction, the joy, and the confidence of possession. Imagine the relief of debts being paid, the security of abundance, the freedom to act without limitation. Feel these emotions as vividly as you would if the outer world already reflected them. The unseen responds not to fantasy alone, but to the living conviction of inner reality. Consider a woman who longed to pay her bills and provide for her household. She had little money, and fear often gripped her heart. Yet each morning, she closed her eyes and saw herself in possession of the silver and the gold. She imagined the coins in her hand, the bills on her table, and the calm, assured knowledge that all her needs were met. Within days, small gifts arrived, forgotten debts were returned, opportunities appeared for extra work she had never sought. The imagination had drawn the outer reality into conformity with the inner recognition. This is the law at work. The vision in imagination must be detailed, precise, and personal. A vague desire will not compel the universe. You must see and feel the particular circumstances, the exact possession, and the living reality of wealth. Consider a man who wishes to be prosperous. He may think, "I want money." Yet such a thought is too general. Instead, he must see the coins and notes, feel their presence, imagine the satisfaction of ownership, and dwell in the certainty that they are already his. The outer world responds with the same precision. The silver and the gold that exist in consciousness manifest in forms consistent with the inner scene. Imagination also allows you to bridge the gap between present limitation and desired abundance. A man may find himself in debt, unemployed, or denied opportunity. In his imagination, he sees himself free, provided for, and secure. He walks through doors previously closed, receives what is owed, and enjoys the comfort and freedom of wealth. Though outward circumstances may seem contrary, the unseen realm obeys his inner recognition. Events align, debts are repaid, opportunities arrive, and what was imagined becomes manifest. The law of imagination is impartial, exact, and inevitable. Think of a story from daily life. A young artist desired to sell his work but found no buyers. He imagined a gallery opening, patrons examining his paintings, compliments flowing, coins exchanged, and contracts signed. Each day he rehearsed the scene in full detail, feeling the joy and satisfaction of success. Weeks later, a local gallery contacted him, offered a show, and sales followed immediately. He had not forced the world, he had imagined with conviction, and the outer world had responded. The silver and the gold existed first in consciousness and were brought into form through persistent, living imagination. Notice also that imagination is not limited by time. You may see the scene as it exists now, tomorrow, or next year. The unseen realm does not distinguish between temporal intervals, it responds to state. To imagine wealth as already possessed is to occupy the state of having, regardless of current appearances. The outer world, like water following a channel, flows to conform with the inner recognition. This is why the vision must be complete: coins, notes, bills, opportunities, satisfaction, and the feeling of assurance. The law of imagination requires completeness. Half measures do not compel reality. Consider a businesswoman struggling to meet payroll. Each morning, she imagines the entire payroll already met, the accounts balanced, her staff content, her own relief and confidence palpable. Though outwardly she may see bills unpaid, her imagination sustains the scene of wealth. Within weeks, clients pay on time, funds arrive unexpectedly, and her accounts are balanced. The unseen realm has moved in accordance with her inner recognition. She has lived in the reality of her desire, and the outer world bends obediently to the scene she has held. Imagination is also the tool to navigate resistance. There may be voices of doubt, appearances of lack, or obstacles that seem insurmountable. Yet, when you dwell in the scene of wealth, feeling it real and inevitable, these appearances cannot withstand the pressure of inner reality. They are shadows, reflections of temporary disbelief. The moment your inner vision is clear, living, and accompanied by the feeling of possession, the outer world is compelled to conform. The law does not negotiate, it obeys. The silver and the gold, existing eternally in consciousness, are brought into form when recognized in imagination. It is important to practice consistently. Imagination must be employed daily, hourly if possible, to hold the scene with certainty and feeling. One morning is insufficient. One fleeting thought does not create the outer world. The treasure responds to sustained recognition. Repetition, combined with vivid feeling, strengthens the inner conviction and compels the unseen to manifest. Each day, close your eyes, see the silver and the gold, feel them in your hand, hear the rustle of coins, the exchange of bills, the comfort of provision. The unseen realm takes this as the law of reality, and the outer world responds accordingly. Let us consider a young man who desired to inherit wealth long withheld. He had no means to claim it, yet he spent each morning in vivid imagination. He saw himself receiving the inheritance, feeling gratitude, and spending wisely. Though the lawyer had not yet acted, the heirs had not yet agreed, the unseen world responded. Documents arrived sooner than expected, permissions were granted, and the treasure was released. He had assumed the state through imagination. The silver and the gold had always been his. Imagination brought them into form. Imagination must also be accompanied by inner belief. A man may see a scene of wealth, but if doubt resides alongside the vision, the unseen realm hesitates. Feeling and conviction are inseparable from imagination. One must see, feel, and accept the reality fully. The scene must be alive, as real as any present moment. Only then does the law respond. The universe reflects what consciousness accepts as real, and the outer world is compelled to conform to the inner assumption. Consider a seamstress who struggled to feed her family. Each evening, she imagined herself counting coins, paying bills, and enjoying comfort without strain. She felt the relief and gratitude as though the outer world had already provided. Within weeks, work came her way unbidden, and gifts were returned, and gifts arrived unexpectedly. She had not labored beyond her skill. She had occupied the state of wealth, and the silver and the gold had manifested. This is the certainty of imagination, precise, impartial, and responsive to conviction alone. The imagination is also the source of creative opportunity. By dwelling in the scene of abundance, one begins to see openings previously invisible, coincidences aligned, and paths appearing where none seemed possible. Doors open, connections are made, ideas flow, and the outer world presents the opportunities necessary to materialize the imagined wealth. You do not need to chase, you do not need to struggle. You see, feel, and assume, and the universe arranges itself according to the inner vision. The silver and the gold are drawn into form by the very act of imagination. Even the smallest act of vivid imagining can set the law into motion. A child imagining coins in a jar, a worker imagining the payment arriving on time, a homemaker imagining provision for her household, all participate in the same principle. The unseen obeys state, not circumstance. The more detailed, vivid, and feeling-filled the imagination, the stronger the manifestation. The law has no distinction between grand and simple desires. It responds faithfully to inner recognition. It is therefore essential to cultivate clarity, detail, and feeling in imagination. Do not see a vague notion of wealth. See the coins, notes, and exchanges. Hear the transactions, feel the relief, smell the leather, taste the satisfaction. Immerse yourself in the reality of your desire and allow it to live fully within. The universe will respond with equal precision. The outer world cannot resist the inner recognition, and the silver and the gold eternal in consciousness, are brought into the realm of form, it is essential for you to understand that the state precedes the fact. Before a tree bears fruit, it exists in the seed. Before a house stands, it exists in the blueprint. Before a coin passes into your hand, it exists in consciousness. This is the eternal order. The inner state is the cause, and the outer manifestation is the effect. You cannot change the outer world merely by action, nor can you force events by effort alone. The silver and the gold, the abundance you seek, respond to the state you occupy, not to your labor, your pleading, or your striving. Consider the story of a man who lived in poverty yet desired wealth. He spent years trying to improve his circumstances through labor, negotiation, and planning, yet the world remained unyielding. One night, he discovered the principle. The outer world is compelled by the inner state. He began to assume wealth, to live each day in the feeling of possession, to speak quietly, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine." He imagined himself counting coins, paying debts with ease, walking with confidence among those who held resources. Months later, events aligned in ways he had not anticipated. Forgotten assets were returned, opportunities appeared as if by providence, and wealth flowed into his hands. The outer fact followed the inner state. Every master of life understands this truth. They do not labor blindly in the world of appearances. They recognize that the unseen governs all form. The farmer does not wait for the harvest to plant the seed. He plants, nourishes, and believes in the unseen growth beneath the soil. Similarly, when you occupy the state of wealth, when you see, feel, and accept the silver and the gold as present now, the universe organizes itself in exact accordance with that state. What you behold with the mind, what you feel in the heart, is what is drawn into form. Let me illustrate further. A young woman struggled with unpaid bills, limited work, and a sense of limitation. She realized that her outer circumstances could not be altered merely by effort. She decided instead to enter into the state of abundance. Each morning, she imagined herself receiving payment, feeling satisfaction, and walking with the security of provision. She did not focus on the absence of money, but on the presence of wealth. Within weeks, work arrived unexpectedly, debts were returned, and her household was provided for. The silver and the gold had existed in the unseen all along. They had only awaited her recognition, her assumption of their possession. Notice carefully, the state is not an idle thought or fleeting wish. It is a living occupation of consciousness. To occupy the state means to feel, think, and imagine as though the desire is already fulfilled. A man who seeks a sum of money must enter fully into the scene of having it, feel its presence in his hand, hear the sound of coins and notes, sense the relief and freedom that come with abundance. This feeling, sustained and deliberate, compels the unseen realm to mirror the inner reality. The outer fact is never first. It is always a response to the inner state. Consider a merchant who desired to expand his business but lacked the resources. Each evening, he closed his eyes and imagined his shop filled with customers, his accounts overflowing, his success acknowledged. He spoke quietly to himself, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine," and felt the certainty as though it were true now. Days passed, yet the shop appeared unchanged. He persisted, knowing that the inner state governs the outer form. Soon, an unexpected client brought a significant order. A debt owed long before was repaid, and his business flourished. The outer fact had followed the state he had maintained in consciousness. Even when obstacles appear, the state remains sovereign. You may see debts, scarcity, or misfortune, yet these are merely appearances. They are shadows of disbelief, temporary reflections of a mind not fully occupied with reality. If you dwell in the state of having, if you see the silver and the gold as yours, these appearances cannot persist. The unseen responds to the living reality within, not to appearances outside. This is why men and women may labor without result, while others, who maintain the inner state, prosper effortlessly. The difference is the state occupied, Let us consider a young man who struggled to secure a position in a competitive field. Each morning, he imagined himself successful, welcomed, and rewarded. He felt the joy of accomplishment as though it were present now. Though the interviews initially seemed discouraging, opportunities emerged that he had not sought, mentors appeared unexpectedly, and doors opened in perfect alignment with his inner assumption. The outer facts followed the inner state. The silver and the gold, already present in consciousness, were brought into tangible form. The same principle applies to health, relationships, and every desire you hold. The outer manifestation is always the effect of the inner state. A mother who fears for the provision of her children may imagine lack, and she sees limitation in the world. A mother who assumes abundance, who sees coins, bills, and provision flowing freely, experiences unexpected assistance, gifts, and opportunities. The outer fact responds to the state assumed within. The unseen is impartial, exact, and infinitely responsive to the reality you occupy. Imagination, coupled with feeling, strengthens the state and compels the unseen. It is not enough to say, "I desire wealth." You must live it, breathe it, feel it as present now. Visualize the silver and the gold in your hand, hear the exchange, sense the satisfaction, and maintain the certainty of possession. This state precedes the fact. The world cannot resist it. Opportunity, provision, and abundance are drawn irresistibly into form. The outer fact is merely a reflection of the inner reality. Consider a businesswoman who had long struggled with her accounts. She feared failure, yet she resolved to occupy the state of wealth. Each morning, she imagined her finances balanced, her clients paying promptly, and her satisfaction complete. Within weeks, payments arrived early, debts were forgiven, and unexpected clients provided additional work. She had not altered her circumstances through struggle, she had assumed the state, and the outer facts followed. The silver and the gold had existed all along, waiting only for her recognition. The state also explains why some receive fortune unexpectedly, while others, equally diligent, do not. It is not effort, skill, or circumstance that governs, but the inner assumption. A man may labor tirelessly, yet if his consciousness dwells in lack, he experiences limitation. Another, who maintains the state of wealth, finds doors opening without effort. The unseen realm responds to the state, and the outer fact manifests in perfect harmony. The law does not fail, it is the state that precedes, and form follows inevitably. Even when you encounter seeming contradiction, the principle holds. A man may see scarcity, yet in the inner state of abundance, the unseen rearranges circumstances to conform with assumption. This is why faith, feeling, and imagination are essential. Occupy the state fully, and the outer facts follow. Doubt, hesitation, and attention to lack weaken the law. Only sustained, living assumption compels manifestation. The silver and the gold await your recognition, your occupation of the state, your acceptance of provision as present. Consider also the subtlety of timing. The unseen does not work according to your schedule, but responds immediately to the state assumed. You may imagine wealth today, and tomorrow the outer facts align. You may hold the state for weeks or months, during which appearances remain contrary, yet the unseen works steadily, arranging conditions to match the inner reality. The key is persistence. Do not be swayed by appearances. Dwell in the state as if the outer world already reflects it. The law is exact, and the outer fact follows inevitably. Stories abound of those who trusted the state over appearances. A young father, fearing for his family, assumed the presence of provision. He imagined coins, notes, and opportunities flowing freely. Days seemed empty, bills remained unpaid, yet he persisted. Within weeks, unexpected income arrived, debts were cancelled, and his household was provided for. The outer facts had followed the inner state. The silver and the gold, eternal in consciousness, manifested in obedience to assumption. It is important to recognize that the state is personal, vivid, and complete. Half-hearted wishes or vague hopes do not compel the unseen. You must occupy the state fully, imagine in detail, and feel the reality as if it exists now. A merchant does not imagine a general notion of wealth. He sees the coins, bills, transactions, and satisfaction. A homemaker does not merely hope for provision. She imagines abundance flowing freely to her household. This precision, combined with feeling, compels the unseen realm to respond. Even ordinary events are influenced by this principle. A worker who imagines receiving wages in advance, a student who imagines scholarships and resources arriving, a shopkeeper who imagines patrons and sales, all participate in the law. The outer fact must follow the inner state. The unseen is impartial and exact. It responds to the reality occupied in consciousness, not to labor, pleading, or effort. The silver and the gold are drawn into form by the state assumed. Imagination and assumption must be consistent. One morning of vivid imagining is insufficient. One fleeting thought cannot compel the outer world. The state must be maintained, reinforced, and accompanied by feeling. Each day, close your eyes, imagine coins, notes, bills, and provision flowing freely. Feel the relief and satisfaction as though it exists now. The unseen responds, and gradually, the outer facts align with the inner reality. This is the power of the law, precise, impartial, and inevitable. Let us examine the principle through a simple parable. A man in debt imagined himself free, walking confidently among friends, receiving coins and notes, paying debts with ease. At first, his circumstances seemed unchanged. Weeks passed, yet he maintained the state. Soon, unexpected opportunities appeared, debts were forgiven, forgotten sums returned, and the silver and the gold manifested. The outer fact followed the inner state. The unseen had worked faithfully, responding to his living assumption. Now we come to the act of faith, the deliberate inner decision to sustain the feeling of the wish fulfilled, regardless of what the outer senses may reveal. Faith is not a vague hope nor a fleeting prayer. It is the conviction that the silver and the gold already exist, that abundance is a present reality, and that nothing in the world can alter this truth. When you hold this conviction, when you dwell in the feeling of possession, the unseen realm is compelled to respond. The outer world cannot resist the inner certainty of faith, for faith is the creative force that moves mountains, opens doors, and releases treasures hidden in the unseen. Consider the man who seeks to expand his fortune. He may observe debts, bills, and scarcity surrounding him. To the eyes of others, the situation appears bleak, yet he chooses faith. Each morning, he closes his eyes and envisions coins and notes flowing into his possession, feels the relief and joy of abundance, and speaks quietly to himself, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine." This act of inner recognition, this unwavering assumption of possession, begins to reorder circumstances around him. Opportunities appear unbidden, debts are repaid, and the world aligns itself with the inner reality. Faith is not passive, it is a living occupation of consciousness, sustained and deliberate. Many are misled by appearances. They see lack, failure, or misfortune and believe the outer world dictates reality. Yet the unseen, guided by consciousness, obeys only the inner state. Faith, then, is the refusal to be moved by outer evidence. A man may see empty coffers, a woman may see unpaid bills, but if they hold unwavering faith in the reality of the silver and the gold, the universe responds accordingly. The act of faith is the recognition that the outer world is secondary, a mirror reflecting the state occupied within. The outer fact cannot contradict the inner certainty when faith is fully established. Let us take an example from ordinary life. A young tradesman struggled to receive payments owed to him. Each day he was confronted by evidence of scarcity. Yet he decided to act in faith. He closed his eyes each morning and imagined the coins and bills in his hand, felt the satisfaction of having been paid, and spoke quietly to himself, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine." Within days, payments arrived, unexpected customers provided additional revenue, and debts were repaid in ways he had not anticipated. Faith had compelled the unseen to respond, and the outer facts had conformed to the inner state. Faith is also tested by time. You may imagine and assume the state of wealth for weeks, months, or even years, while the outer world seems unchanged. The outer appearance is not the measure of reality. Faith is the unwavering persistence in assuming possession despite delay, the steadfast conviction that the silver and the gold are already yours. The unseen does not work according to human timing, but responds immediately to the state assumed. The moment you occupy the feeling of possession, the universe sets in motion the events that will bring it into manifestation. Consider a story of a woman who longed for provision for her household. Her bills were unpaid, her work meager, and her hopes seemed fragile. Yet she chose faith. Each evening, she imagined coins and notes flowing freely to her, felt the relief and security of abundance, and accepted the reality as present now. Weeks passed with little outward evidence, yet she persisted. Then small gifts arrived unexpectedly, forgotten debts were returned, and work opportunities appeared. Faith had moved the unseen, and the outer world yielded to the inner conviction. The silver and the gold had always existed. Her act of faith had compelled their manifestation. Faith is strengthened by repetition, feeling, and imagination. One may speak phrases, imagine scenes, or recall scriptures, yet the potency of faith arises when these acts are accompanied by vivid feeling. Feel the weight of the coins in your hand, hear the rustle of bills, sense the joy and relief of provision, and dwell fully in the reality of abundance. This is the living act of faith. It is not theoretical, it is practical, tangible, and creative. The unseen realm cannot resist the reality you hold in consciousness. The silver and the gold follow the inner state with absolute precision. Observe also that faith is not dependent upon reason or logic. The outer world may appear contrary, and others may doubt, yet the unseen responds to the inner conviction alone. Consider a man who seeks a loan or payment. Banks may refuse, clients may delay, yet if he acts in faith, imagining and feeling as though the silver and the gold are already his, circumstances begin to align. The unseen rearranges events, opportunities, and people to correspond to the state he maintains. The outer fact is merely a reflection of the inner reality. Faith governs, appearances obey. Even the simplest acts performed with faith carry creative power. A student desiring scholarship, a tradesman seeking payment, a homemaker requiring provision for her family, all are empowered by the act of faith. To see, feel, and accept the silver and the gold as present now is to awaken the unseen forces that bring it into form. Faith is not bound by scale. It is the same principle whether the sum desired is small or great. The unseen does not distinguish between modest provision and great wealth. It responds to the inner conviction alone. Faith also serves as a shield against doubt and fear. When a man or woman maintains unwavering faith, outer circumstances cannot disturb the inner state. Bills may remain unpaid, opportunities delayed, yet the inner recognition of wealth remains intact. The outer world is transient, the inner state eternal. By sustaining the act of faith, you preserve the reality of possession, and the unseen realm works tirelessly to bring the outer fact into alignment. The silver and the gold exist in consciousness. Faith releases them into manifestation. Let us consider a young man who desired a sum owed him. Weeks passed without payment, and the outer evidence seemed discouraging. Yet he refused to surrender to doubt. Each day, he imagined the coins and notes in his hand, felt the relief and satisfaction as though payment had been made, and spoke quietly, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine." Soon, a messenger arrived with the long-delayed funds. The unseen had responded to faith. The outer facts had yielded to the inner state. This is the power of sustained assumption. Faith also teaches patience, for it requires persistence despite appearances. You may see scarcity, yet the inner recognition of abundance must be maintained. To waver is to weaken the law. To persist is to compel the unseen. The universe obeys faith with absolute precision, and the silver and the gold are drawn into form when the inner state is held with unwavering conviction. The outer fact will always follow. It may not conform instantly, yet it is inevitable. Consider the example of a young mother struggling to feed her children. She imagined coins, notes, and bills flowing into her hands, felt the relief of provision, and accepted the reality as present. Weeks passed with no outward evidence, yet she persisted. Suddenly, gifts arrived, debts were returned, and opportunities for work presented themselves unexpectedly. Faith had moved the unseen, and the outer world mirrored the inner recognition. The silver and the gold were always hers. Faith had compelled their manifestation. Even in business, the act of faith is transformative. A merchant may see empty shelves, delayed payments, or sparse customers. If he dwells in the inner state of possession, imagining coins and notes flowing freely, feeling satisfaction and security, the unseen aligns circumstances to reflect this reality. Clients arrive unexpectedly, debts are repaid, and opportunities open that had been hidden. Faith is the instrument through which the silver and the gold, already existing in consciousness, are released into outer form. Faith is reinforced by daily practice. Each morning, close your eyes, imagine wealth flowing to you, feel its presence, and dwell fully in the satisfaction of possession. Repeat quietly, the silver is mine, and the gold is mine. Let the feeling saturate your mind and heart. This is not mere repetition of words, it is the living occupation of consciousness. The outer world will respond in perfect accordance with the inner state. Faith, feeling, and imagination together create the conditions for manifestation. Consider a young artist who desired to sell his work. Exhibitions seemed distant, patrons rare, and opportunities scarce, yet he acted in faith. Each day, he imagined coins and bills in his possession, patrons admiring his work, and contracts signed. He felt the joy of provision and accepted the reality as present now. Within weeks, galleries contacted him, buyers appeared, and his work sold beyond expectation. Faith had moved the unseen, and the outer facts mirrored the inner state. The silver and the gold had always existed. The act of faith had brought them into form. Even small acts of faith, performed consistently, carry enormous creative power. A coin found unexpectedly, a payment returned, a gift arriving. These are reflections of inner recognition. The unseen responds with precision to the state you occupy. The silver and the gold, eternal in consciousness, manifest when you sustain the act of faith. The outer world is compelled to reflect the inner reality, and nothing can prevent this law from working. Faith is also a liberation from fear. When you recognize that abundance exists in consciousness and respond accordingly, you are freed from anxiety, doubt, and worry. You do not need to plead, manipulate, or struggle. You only need to sustain the inner recognition of the silver and the gold as yours. This recognition, coupled with feeling and imagination, activates the unseen forces, and the outer world conforms. Faith is the key. It unlocks the treasures hidden within and compels their appearance in form. Let us examine a simple story. A young man owed a sum he had lent. Weeks passed, and the outer evidence seemed discouraging. Yet he maintained faith. He imagined coins and bills flowing to him, felt the relief of possession, and accepted the reality as present. Soon, a messenger arrived with the long-delayed payment. Faith had moved the unseen, the outer facts had yielded to the inner recognition. The silver and the gold, eternal in consciousness, had been brought into form by the act of faith. Now let us turn to the mystical closing, the moment when the outer world is silenced and the inner reality reigns supreme. There is a time, each night, when the world sleeps and the mind is quiet, when you may enter the secret chamber of your consciousness and dwell fully in the possession of all you desire. It is here that the silver and the gold, long sought in the outer world, are recognized in the unseen and brought forth in manifestation. To close the day in this state is to command the forces of life themselves. You must not wait for evidence, you must not seek outward confirmation. Instead, you enter the scene as if it is now, You feel it as though it exists, and you know with quiet certainty that the treasures are yours. Consider the example of a young mother who struggled with her household. She had little money, yet each night she entered her quiet chamber of imagination. She imagined coins in her hands, bills paid, and the comfort of abundance surrounding her family. She felt the relief, the joy, and the freedom of provision. She lingered in this scene long enough to believe it real, long enough to feel it complete. Days later, unexpected gifts arrived, forgotten debts were returned, and her work brought opportunities she had never sought. The outer world conformed to the inner recognition. The silver and the gold had existed all along, waiting for her to close her day in this state. The mystical closing requires complete surrender to the unseen. It is a letting go of the outer evidence, the temporary limitations, and the distractions of the day. As night falls, you may rest in the knowledge that the universe is silent, yet perfectly attentive. The silver and the gold await your recognition, and when you occupy the state fully, the unseen responds. A man may see debts, a woman may see scarcity, yet if they close the day in the possession of their desire, these appearances cannot endure. The law is exact, impartial, and infinitely responsive to the state of consciousness. Let me tell you of a young tradesman. He had labored for years without reward, observing the scarcity of coins and the delay of payments. One night, he chose to close his day in the possession of wealth. He imagined coins, notes, and bills flowing to him, heard the rustle of money, felt the relief of payment, and accepted the scene as present now. Days passed, yet he maintained the state each night. Soon, payments arrived, forgotten debts returned, and new opportunities appeared. The silver and the gold had been drawn forth by his mystical closing, by the act of assuming possession before sleep. Notice carefully that this is not a passive exercise. It requires intention, attention, and feeling. To lie in bed and hope for wealth is not sufficient. You must see, feel, and dwell fully in the reality of possession. Imagine yourself counting coins, handling bills, hearing the exchange, feeling relief and satisfaction. Allow the scene to saturate your consciousness. This is the mystical act, a deliberate, conscious recognition of the silver and the gold as already yours, a state from which the outer world cannot resist but obey. Consider also the precision of imagination in this mystical closing. Vague hopes are powerless, detailed visions command reality. See the coins clearly, feel their weight, sense the rustle of bills, hear the sound of exchange, feel the gratitude and freedom of provision. Let every sense participate in the scene. Let the body, mind, and heart be immersed in the recognition of wealth. The universe responds to living reality, not to vague desire. The silver and the gold follow the inner recognition with unerring exactness. Even in the midst of apparent lack, this mystical closing works. A young man, long denied opportunity, imagined coins, bills, and wealth flowing freely. He held the scene with feeling, allowed it to saturate his consciousness each night, and refused to be moved by outer appearances. Within weeks, unexpected opportunities appeared, debts were returned, and provision flowed with ease. The unseen had responded to the state he occupied. Faith, imagination, and the mystical closing had drawn the silver and the gold into form. The mystical closing is also a bridge between waking and sleeping consciousness. As you move towards slumber, the mind is quiet, receptive, and obedient. It is in this liminal state that the inner recognition takes hold, that the unseen is commanded with absolute precision. When you close your day in possession, imagining, feeling, and knowing that the silver and the gold are yours, you impress the subconscious with reality. It becomes the creative force that arranges circumstances to conform with the inner scene. Sleep is not rest alone. It is the period in which imagination, faith, and feeling shape the unseen world, setting in motion the events that manifest your desire. Consider a businesswoman who faced delayed payments and financial uncertainty. Each night, she entered her chamber of consciousness, imagined coins and bills flowing freely, felt relief, joy, and security, and accepted the reality as present. She allowed herself to rest in this state, releasing outer appearances and surrendering to the unseen. Within weeks, payments arrived, opportunities unfolded, and debts were repaid. The mystical closing had compelled the universe to bring forth the silver and the gold. The unseen works faithfully when recognized in consciousness, and the outer world conforms without delay. Even ordinary people, without great means, may employ this practice with remarkable results. A homemaker may imagine provision for her family, a student may imagine resources arriving to pay tuition, a worker may imagine wages flowing freely. Each, by closing the day in possession, saturates consciousness with the reality of the silver and the gold. The unseen, impartial, and exact brings forth the outer fact in perfect harmony with the inner state. There is no limitation to this law. It operates for all who recognize its authority. The mystical closing also dissolves fear and anxiety. When you recognize that provision exists in the unseen, that wealth is a present reality within consciousness, you are freed from worry. You do not need to struggle or plead. You rest in the inner possession, knowing that the universe, silent yet obedient, is arranging circumstances to bring forth the silver and the gold. This knowledge brings peace, confidence, and the creative power to act in harmony with the unseen law. Consider the example of a young father. Bills were overdue, work was scarce, and fear pressed heavily upon him. Yet each night, he entered his chamber of consciousness, imagined coins and notes flowing into his hands, felt the relief of provision, and accepted the scene as present. Days passed with little outward evidence, yet he persisted. Soon, work appeared unexpectedly, debts were returned, and gifts arrived. The mystical closing, repeated nightly with feeling and imagination, had compelled the unseen to manifest the silver and the gold. Notice also that this practice strengthens faith. By closing the day in possession, by saturating consciousness with the reality of wealth, you reinforce the inner conviction that the silver and the gold are yours. Faith and imagination, exercised in the mystical closing, combine to impress the subconscious with certainty. The subconscious, obedient and precise, arranges circumstances to reflect the inner reality. This is the law at work. The unseen responds to the state occupied, and the outer world conforms without exception. Even in adversity, the mystical closing remains potent. A tradesman may see empty shelves, a student may lack resources, a homemaker may face scarcity. Yet if they close the day in the reality of abundance, imagining, feeling, and knowing that the silver and the gold are present, the unseen works silently but powerfully. Opportunities, provision, and wealth appear in accordance with the inner state. The outer world may delay, yet it cannot contradict the inner recognition. The law is exact, impartial, and inevitable. Stories of ordinary people confirm this truth. A young woman struggling to provide for her household imagined coins and notes in her hands, felt the satisfaction of provision, and rested each night in the recognition of abundance. Days passed, yet she persisted. Unexpected gifts arrived, forgotten debts were returned, and work opportunities opened. The silver and the gold had existed in consciousness. The mystical closing had compelled their manifestation. This is the certainty of law, precise and faithful to those who recognize it. The mystical closing is a conscious act of creation. You are not passive, you are the maker of reality. By imagining, feeling, and knowing, you impress the subconscious with the reality of possession. The unseen obeys, and the outer facts appear. A young man may imagine coins in his pocket, a merchant may imagine bills paid, a student may imagine tuition provided. All are engaged in the same law. The silver and the gold respond to inner recognition, and the universe arranges circumstances in perfect alignment. Even brief moments of deliberate assumption, if repeated consistently, are powerful. Each night, close your eyes, imagine coins and bills, feel the relief and satisfaction, and dwell fully in the scene of abundance. Repeat quietly, the silver is mine and the gold is mine. Allow the feeling to saturate your mind and heart. The unseen works with precision the outer world cannot resist. Faith, imagination, and the mystical closing combine to release the treasures of the unseen into form. Consider a young merchant who had labored without reward. He imagined coins, notes, and abundance flowing to him each night, felt the joy of provision, and rested in the reality of wealth. Soon payments arrived, debts were repaid, and opportunities opened beyond expectation. The mystical closing had compelled the unseen to manifest the silver and the gold. This is the power of deliberate recognition, sustained imagination, and faith in the inner state. The mystical closing also fosters gratitude, which magnifies the effect of imagination and faith. By feeling gratitude for the silver and the gold as though it is already present, you deepen the impression upon the subconscious. Gratitude is not for what appears in the outer world, it is for the recognition of reality in consciousness. A woman may imagine provision for her household and feel grateful for it as present now. This feeling strengthens faith, saturates imagination, and compels the unseen to manifest in accordance with the inner state. Even in the midst of difficulty, the mystical closing preserves power. A student may lack tuition, a worker may face delayed wages, yet by entering the inner chamber each night and dwelling fully in the reality of the silver and the gold, the unseen is impressed. Opportunities, gifts, and provision appear in perfect harmony with the inner recognition. The outer world bends to the law, for the law responds only to state, not to appearances, delay, or limitation. Tonight, as you reflect upon all that has been revealed, know this: the treasures of life, the silver and the gold, are not distant prizes to be sought in toil or chance. They are already present within your consciousness, awaiting recognition, awaiting your deliberate assumption. Each phrase you speak, each scene you imagine, each feeling you embrace, draws these treasures from the unseen into tangible form. The law is exact, it never fails. When you dwell in the state of possession, when you act in faith, when you close each day in the living awareness of abundance, the outer world conforms. Scarcity dissolves, debts are repaid, opportunities appear, and the flow of wealth manifests with effortless precision. The silver and the gold respond not to struggle or reasoning, but to the certainty of consciousness. Carry this truth with you as you move through your days. Let your imagination dwell richly in the reality of possession. Let your faith be unwavering, and let gratitude saturate your heart for all that is already yours. In this way you align with the eternal order, and life, faithful to the inner state you occupy, becomes the mirror of your assumption. The treasures are yours now, the silver and the gold belong to the consciousness that embraces them as present.